Norman Conquest, chapter 4, castles again. Remember, it's all about interpretation. So there have been 3 big interpretations about why castles were built. So the traditional, which is original, which is first interpretation, which comes from the era of the First World War. Ella Armitage looked at the castles and instantly said, well, they're military, aren't they? You know, they were built to dominate the lives of the people. Let's face it though, she's going to be influenced by the time period. You know, we were a country preparing for war, so it's about seeing kind of like war and control everywhere, and that's what she sees in the castles. So it then takes obviously a few more years until people start to think, well, actually, were they built for military reasons, or could we see other reasons for why they were built? That's your revisionist, yeah, revise, revisit. And so they then, more historians look at them and actually go, do you know what? They were built out of timber. They were really weak. So how on earth are they about military control? They're there for status instead. Then we have another interpretation by everyone's favourite, Mark Morris. I have got that book. And so he looks at it and goes, actually, I think these guys are wrong. And what evidence does he use? He sees very much the brutality and the resistance and the rebellion. He very much links it to the castle and cavalry connection that we talked about in chapter 1. There you go. And that's what it's all about. Castles have to be regarded first and foremost as military installations, introduced to subdue an unwilling population. Castles were built for military control because the English hated the Normans. Right, where do we, again, come up with our ideas? So we've got a bit of a mixed idea in terms of looking at the stone buildings left behind. So Exeter have got this amazing gatehouse, and they look at that and go, well, actually, the gatehouse is facing the wrong way. It's a little bit more status, it's a little bit more showing off. So actually, perhaps they were there for the status as opposed to the military features. Then people look at the earthworks. They look defensive. I know a lot of it's missing. I know all the timber is missing, all the wood is missing, but they do look very, very defensive. You know, they do look as if once you've got that palisade on top of those ramparts, it's going to be very, very difficult to break into it. So there's a bit of evidence to support military fortress. Then we've got the idea of looking at the landscape. Mentioned before, we had the fact that they were built in the countryside. Look, 80% of them built in the countryside. What you've got to do is remember to ignore all of those modern day houses and actually go, right, they put the castle there and they put this priory over here, and it's all about showing off. And that's, again, evidence of the status symbol. Best example of that is Castle Acre. All right, so learn that example. It's a really good example of a status symbol castle. Learn it. Depth of knowledge. But then we go back to the idea of it being a military fortress. I mentioned Hendomen earlier. I said it was on the Welsh border. And so archaeologists have looked at what's been left behind at Hendomen and gone, actually, do you know what? That's a great example of it being a military fortress. Helped in terms of its location, the fact it was on that English-Welsh border. Remember, Wales is not part of England. And they found lots of evidence to support the idea of it being a military fortress. Near the roads for control, near the river for control. Double ramparts, deep ditches, that's all about control. Palisade on top, that's all about control. They found no jewellery, really, which means it's not for the wealthy, it wasn't for ladies, it was for the soldiers. So, don't forget, right, the idea of the castles, military fortress or status symbol.